Hello and welcome back to another episode of Popular Philosophy. And this week, we're jumping right into an account of Phenomenology, Husserl and Heidegger. So please keep in mind that I'm giving a narrative of what I believe are some of the origins of postmodernity. Every great philosophy begins not with an answer, but with a wound. Husserl felt that wound of modern thought, that we had grown so accustomed to abstract systems, to lifeless formulas, that we no longer saw the world itself. He longed to return us to the living pulse of experience, to the simple, profound act of perceiving, feeling, and attending. He called this return phenomenology. What is it to begin philosophy anew? What does it mean to stand at the threshold of thought, where certainty slips and the question of human being itself becomes unsettled? Today, we're tracing that path. It begins with Edmund Husserl, who dreamt of a foundation for all knowledge. And it carries us into Martin Heidegger, who transformed the dream into something stranger, more unsettling, and more radical. And from Heidegger, the way opens up into the postmodern condition. It is not merely a history of philosophy. Really, it is a drama of modern thought itself, reaching its limits and being forced to leap beyond them. So part one, Husserl's dream of certainty. Husserl was, in a sense, the last system builder of modern philosophy. He wanted to restore philosophy to the rigor of science. And something that needs to be understood about this rigor of science, it's a term that kind of comes up, I think, in Kant and with a lot of the German idealists. So in Husserl's logical investigations, this is between the years of 1900 and 1901, he begins with a manifesto. Philosophy, he says, is to be made a rigorous science, not through speculation, but through returning to things themselves, back to the things themselves. This is Husserl's rallying cry. But what does it mean? At the heart of its method, he calls it phenomenology. Instead of speculating about hidden metaphysical realities, Husserl says, let us turn to how things appear to our consciousness. Let us describe experience as it is lived. To do this, Husserl introduces two crucial moves. First, intentionality. What is this? It's a revival of a scholastic term, meaning that consciousness is always conscious of something. So what does that mean? We do not float in a void of thought. Every act of awareness, seeing, imagining, remembering, is directed towards an object. As he writes in Ideas, all consciousness is consciousness of something. Now, just to kind of bridge the gap here when it comes to the history of this thought, the return to things themselves is really a concern that comes about after Kant splits up the divide between the noumena and the phenomena. What this noumena and the phenomena means, noumena has to do with things that do not appear. They are things themselves. And the phenomena have to do with things that appear to our consciousness or to our senses. In all of this, the simple phrase changes everything. It means experience is structured, meaningful, and intentional for Husserl. The second move is epoche, or what he calls a bracket. Husserl realizes that in describing consciousness, we must suspend our assumptions about whether the world really exists outside of us. He calls this epoche. We do not deny the world, we simply set it aside so we can examine experience as experience. In Ideas 1, he puts it starkly. We put out action of the general thesis, which belongs to the essence of the natural standpoint. We do not deny this world, as though we were skeptics, but we use epoche. We keep ourselves from making any judgment about its existence. So, in this way, Husserl hoped to secure a universal ground for knowledge to describe with absolute rigor the structures of consciousness itself. So now we got to jump into how Heidegger radically transforms this. Part 2, Heidegger's transformation. One of Husserl's most brilliant students was Martin Heidegger. At first, he followed Husserl's path, even serving as his assistant. But Heidegger saw a problem. Husserl was still too focused on consciousness. too much on the subject. For Heidegger, this was not radical enough. He asked, what about existence itself? What about the fact that we are beings who live, who act, and who die? In his masterpiece, Being and Time, in 1927, Heidegger begins not with consciousness, but with Dasein, literally the being there, the word for the human being. Dasein is not detached from the subject gazing at phenomena. Dasein is in the world. Heidegger writes, Dasein is in each case mine. The being which this being is concerned about in its being is always my own. And Heidegger also writes, being in the world is a structure which is equiprimordial with care. This is Heidegger's great break with Husserl. Instead of bracketing the world, he plunges into it. We are not isolated spectators, we are thrown beings, entangled with things, with others, with our own finitude. Where Husserl saw intentional consciousness, Heidegger saw existence itself as a question, the question of being. So now we get into the existential turn, part 3, the existential turn. Heidegger radicalizes Husserl by asking about time and death. Husserl wanted eternal structures of consciousness. Heidegger insists the meaning of human existence is inseparable from its temporality. We live toward our own death. Death is not merely an event at the end, but it is the horizon of our existence. In Being and Time, Heidegger writes, death is Dasein's own most possibility, the possibility of the impossibility of any existence at all. This thought shakes philosophy. It replaces the dream of eternal certainty with the fragility of finite existence. And so now we can go and look at how this contributes to a postmodern turn. So part 4, from Heidegger to the postmodern. So here lies the pivot. Husserl hoped to found philosophy on secure ground. Heidegger showed that the ground itself is unstable because existence is historical, it's finite, and it's thrown. The insight becomes the seed for what we call postmodernity. Derrida, for example, takes Heidegger's deconstruction of metaphysical certainty and radicalizes it into what is generally termed deconstruction, the endless play of meaning, the impossibility of final foundations. Lyotard speaks of the end of grand narratives, Foucault of the historical contingencies that shape knowledge and power. All of them inherit something from Heidegger, the sense that philosophy cannot rest on timeless structures, but must reckon with finitude, history, and difference. So here's my conclusion. The story from Husserl to Heidegger is not about two German philosophers. It's about the fate of modern thought itself. From the dream of rigorous science to the abyss of existence and time. And finally, to the disillusion of the foundations in postmodernity. Philosophy in this story does not end, it simply transforms. And we are left with the question that drives this series. If there is no eternal ground, how shall we live? Thank you all for listening. If you found this video to be interesting, if you learned anything, please like and comment. And for future videos, please subscribe so you can be alerted. Thank you all.